Right, let's get stuck into everything then. So in this little snippet of the tutorial, I'm going to explain to you about the drums. Okay, so whenever you're building up a dance track, you know the drums are really important because obviously it carries the melody, it carries the rhythm of the track. You know, it keeps everything going so that you can fit your bass and everything else around it. And the most important part of that is definitely your kick drum. Um, your kick drum goes like usually all the way through your track, apart from there's a breakdown thing. Keeps the pace, keeps everything, you know, punchy and thuddy, and keeps it going through the track. So that's the main element in there. So what we do is we start with a kick drum. Now this is my kick drum, which I make in a plugin called Bassism, which again, in the how-to series of tutorials I did for you, it explains in there how I use Bassism to make a kick. And it's basically this little plugin here. And if you get this project in, you'll have the setting that I use. So if you want to use this in your tracks, that's cool. And that's basically the kick. And the beauty of this thing is you can actually put your kick in key with your track. Now, as soon as you put your kick in key with your track, you get less harmonic distortion, and that's where, you know, basically if things are out of key and in the wrong range and everything, you know, it causes your track to be muddy. You can't get it clean, and you can't get the loudness out of your track as well. So by putting your kick in key, it's hitting in the sub frequency range, and that bottom bit of sub stays in key and works with the rest of your track beautifully. You know, so if you actually, you know, mess around with this yourself and put your kick out of key and then listen to it when you put it in key, you can tell the difference, but you can't really tell the difference through a laptop, just, you know, for video. So just mess around by changing this frequency and you can hear exactly what I mean. So we've got this one here set how we need it, and, you know, again, if you play with everything and you watch the other tutorial, that'll teach you everything again. Okay, so this is our main kick drum, which comes from Bassism, and what we've done on there is we've put a little EQ on there. Now what we've done is we've taken out a lot of the mid-range, because where this is where a lot of the synth and everything in your track are going to sit. So if you've got your kick drum, you know, pounding away all the way through your track, and it's hitting the same frequency ranges as everything else that's in there, every time it kicks, you're taking up a bit of space, even though for a split second, you're taking up a bit of frequency space that you don't need in there. So we take that out of there, and we just shave a little bit off the bottom, just to get rid of that, you know, nasty bit of sub that you can't hear, that doesn't need to be there. So if I play the kick tier without the EQ, you can understand what I'm saying. So that's straight out of Bassism. And as soon as we EQ it, we just take a bit of that mid out, and you can listen to the difference. There you go. So it tightens it up and it makes it sound thuddier, and you get the elements that you need down there. Now, that's with it being synthesized, it does sound very synthesized in the mix. So what I do next is I add like a top layer to my kick. Okay, so what we do is I usually just take a kick that I like, you know, like a sample or something like that. So if I just solo this on its own. Now this was just a Vengeance kick drum that I like the sound of, which originally sounds like this. It's quite a sort of hard, thuddy, you know, sharp kick. And then all we've done is we've EQ'd it just so we're getting the little bit of mid-range in there, that even though we've taken it all round, just to give you sort of that MIDI click without too much being in there, and it sounds like this. So it's just a little bit of a more natural click which sits over the other kick drum. So what we'll do is we'll play them together, and it sounds like this. Just adds a nice knock and makes it sound a little bit more natural, but you've still got that, like, you know, massive punch underneath in the sub-frequency range. Okay. Another thing you might have noticed is I've put things into folders. Now, if you take a sample, let's go into my samples and just get I don't know, just a basic kick drum or something. Just so I can show you what I do here. We'll just take a random kick, okay? So say that's the kick that we're going to use as a layer. If you press the Alt button and click down and drag it, it copies it. There you go, and you select it again, hold the Alt button on your keyboard down, click it, drag it again, like that, okay? And then all we do is we select them all and we press Shift, Command and F, okay? So I just highlight them all again, Shift, Command and F, and what that does is it puts them into a folder, and you just double click on it if you want to move anything inside the folder, okay? And double click on your page again to come out. And it just makes things a bit tidier, like if you see in the project, everything's a lot tidier, and you know, it just keeps everything together, so it's not as messy. So it's just a nice way of working, okay? Yeah, so after we've got our kicks, I always go for my clap. I always get my clap next or my snare because they always sit well together. So in this case, we've got the clap here, and I'll play that we've got going on. Now this clap, again, it's just another Vengeance sample that I really liked. And if I play it on its own, it's got a nice little reverb tail on it, but it's a nice and short sort of attacky clap, so you get a nice sort of jab from the clap, but you've got a nice bit of space afterwards, okay? And what I do to these claps is I EQ them, just take off what doesn't need to be there. You know, again, I don't really over EQ things because I like to use clean samples, and if you use clean samples, you don't need to work on things too much, and you don't have to spend time correcting the EQ. If the EQ's already clean, you just got to take off what you don't need. You know, and like if you do want to add character and things to stuff, it's nice to use a vintage EQ, like the Waves SSL EQ, rather than just like a standard EQ, because these are great for just getting rid of things. But you know, you can, if you want to add character, it's good to use something that'll give it a bit of colour. Okay, so we take that bottom end that we don't want on there. And the next thing I do is use this little thing called sample delay. Now what this does, it delays the left and right sides of your stereo channel of the sample by milliseconds, okay? Sorry, by samples. So you can move it like nanoseconds apart. And what that does is that gives you like a wide spreading effect without using stereo spread. You're just offsetting your samples. Now if you're not careful, you can cause all sorts of like phasing and flamming and things, and put things out a bit like off if you use it on too many sounds. But just to use it on little bits like your clap and everything, it works great. So what I do is I delay the left by 300 samples and the right by 500, and then what you've got to do next is up here where it says delay, if you select all that channel, is delay that by between 18 and 20 milli, whatever measurement that is, even if it's samples again or whatever. But if you don't, it sounds like this with your kick drum, and it sounds out of time. So I'll just show you that. It sounds like it's just starting to, it doesn't hit on properly. So we just put, you know, mess around with it. It could be different depending on what clap or anything you've got, but this works for me. And then if you listen to it, it's only slight, but it just tightens everything up. And you know, if you do that, it just gets your kick in a nice place. So it's almost like you've got a gel around your kick now. You've got like just before the start of your kick and just after it, you've got a nice bit of sort of like fizz around there. Okay, so when they're all together, that starts to sound good. And next I've got like a big snare, which is actually a drum and bass snare. Just another sample that I used really. This is out of the drum and bass sample pack that I've got. And all I did to the snare was a little bit of EQing, bring the ring out at the bottom of it, around 200, and just where it rasps at the top, just bring all them bits out there, okay? So we'll play that together. Yeah, so that's the snare. As you can see, everything's really simple, and I think, again, as long as your sounds are good, you know, you do need to keep it simple, because everything just works well and sounds good, and it doesn't sound overdone. Whereas if you just overwork things, you can just complicate everything and ruin it. So then next up, we've got a 909 hat in there, which again, just another sample. This again, it's out of a drum and bass sample pack that I've got. Just a little bit of EQing on there. There we go. And then just a ride sample, which is just again another Vengeance sample, the nice ride that I like. Just shelved off the bits of EQing that I didn't need in there. Now, if I've got more elements going on in my percussion, you know, like if there's trippy hi-hats in there and other things, my EQing is a little bit more intense. Like, you know, you are ducking out around certain frequencies just so you've got room for everything to come through. But just don't overdo it, you know. So when it's all together, it sounds like this. Everything's got its own place, everything's got its own space, and it all just sounds really nice together. So what I do then is, once I've got like a nice happy medium with my drums, is I select the output on here, and instead of going out to your normal channel, like just your output or whatever, we go to a bus, and I send it to my drum mix, which I've already got set up in my template. And the reason why I use buses is because if you turn your buses down, you know, if you start with say -6 dB on your buses, then you've got more headroom to play with your faders, so you're not mixing too quietly with everything. And then you can mix all your levels quite loud into one channel, rather than having to mess around with lots of little quiet, you know, faders and everything. It just works really well for me. And it's a little bit like working with an analog summing desk. And then on these buses, you can treat your drums separately, your bass separately, and everything, just to add a bit of character in there and everything. So what we've done is we've sent all of these drum parts, as you can see here, they all go through the bus, which is the drum mix, okay? And then what we've put on our drum mix, if it's on that channel, it should come up at the side here, is just a Waves SSL compressor. Now this is just to add a little bit of colour and character to your drums. Now if I bypass it and we listen to it, sounds really clean and really sharp. And what this does is it just adds like a little bit of glue and a bit of sort of like squeeze to make it all sound a bit more uniform, and adds a nice bit of colour to it. Now I don't know if you'll hear this just like on laptop speakers or anything, but if you've got the project and you've got the plugins, you'll hear it yourself. So here we go. You see, it just tightens everything up, makes you kick a little bit clicky, and just adds like just that glue into your overall mix. So then, if you've got your SSL compressor in there and that's all sounding good, one of the other things that I like to do, which sometimes works but I don't always do it, is you can just add a little bit of EQ to your drums there. So like using like the FabFilter EQs, which is what I mainly use now. I didn't really use them in this project. Like, if we stick it onto drums, it adds another sort of element of punch in there. The FabFilter Pro Q doesn't add colour like a vintage EQ does. It's just really, really accurate at reproducing the right frequencies in a really clean way. So if we listen to that with this on. There you go. It just adds a nice bit of bit more punch and depth to your drums. So that's pretty much it for the drums in this track. It doesn't really go too crazy through that. We just use a combination of switching between a few drum builds and things like that, which all I've done is chop and layer up drums, and I'll play them a little bit like this. There we go, so that's pretty much the drums for the track. The next thing you want to do is start to arrange it just up to a minute, and then you can build your drums from the beginning up to where like our first breakdown is. And I think if you build your intro up from there, you know, things coming in and out, build it right up to where your first drop is, or to where your bass is going to come in or whatever. It's a nice way of starting to structure your track. The only other thing that I've put in here, which I'll mention, is at the beginning we've got a filtered kick, which is basically exactly the same as the main kick we've got in Bassism, but all I've done is whack a filter on there, and we're just taking out some of the bottom frequencies. So if I play that to you, you'll see exactly what I mean. just a nice little touch you can do. Now you can either do that with an EQ and just, you know, shelve off the EQ to where you want it to, but I think a filter with a little bit of resonance on it works really nice on that. There we go. So that's pretty much how we structure our drums and build them up. And yeah, let's move on.